smoothly. And Hillary Clinton, 126,000 voters is quite a few.
Yeah.
Hillary, if that's true, Hillary Clinton, 57%, Bernie Sanders 43%, which is actually slightly closer than we thought. I mean, they were trumpeting the big clean-up in New York for Hillary, weren't they?
He's got a bit of New York history, though, hasn't he, Sanders? So maybe that boosted his...
Yeah, they feel the burn a little in New York.
Feel the burn. It doesn't seem to matter that Donald Trump called 9/11 7/11. He seems to have got 60% of the vote, which is huge.
Yeah.
And Ted Cruz seems to have got about 14 point something.
So he's riding towards that happy place, isn't he, when he's going to actually get enough to get across the line?
What's the GOP going to do? Because they just won't want to let him get that nomination. I'd be wearing a Kevlar vest if I was Trump from this moment on.
You see, this puts him, at about 800, and he's still got a way to go, 850 plus. But
he needs to get to, 1,200 and something.
But Cruz is nowhere near. Yeah. He's less than he's fewer than 600. So Trump's not going to be overtaken, presumably, by Ted. And so a brokered convention presumably will be a mess, whatever way you look at it.
Yeah, and it'll leave the Republican Party even more shattered than it was before this whole hoo-ha started.
That's the result from New York. We've got time to talk about casting Scarlett Johansson, which is kind of interesting. They're making a big-budget movie based on the Japanese animation Ghost in the Shell. And the plot of this is that computer tech has advanced, and if you know Ghost in the Shell, you'll know all this, to the point where members of the public possess cyber brains that allow them to interface their biological brains with various networks. It's going to happen to us all.
I like it. So we can be hacked or just take a weekend to defrag yourself.
Yeah, all that stuff.
I made that sound dirty. Sorry.
It was quite funny. Motoko Kusanagi, played by Scarlett Johansson, is a cyborg. And she had a terrible accident as a child, and so it's a bit like the $6 Million Man. She has to use a full-body prosthesis to house her cyber brain. Anyway, she has got the role, and now there's a whitewashing debate. Caucasian woman playing Asian character, and they announced her for the role a while back, but now that everyone's seen what she'll look like in the film, which doesn't seem very Asian, the furore has revived and there's a lot more discussion. What do you reckon? I mean, we know why they've done it.
Sure, they want a bankable box office star. It's a conversation we've had in New Zealand for decades now, that there are so few roles for people who aren't Pākehā, that if you are going to have a character who could be or actually is in this instance, then it's a job for somebody of that ethnicity who's not going to get a job that, playing a Scarlett Johansson type character, a white girl in a movie. If you won't cast an Asian as a white person, then don't cast a white person as an Asian.
And it's not even that she doesn't, isn't a little bit un-Asian looking. She doesn't look remotely Asian, which makes it all the more insulting, I would have thought. There's just something so fundamentally wrong. Yeah, I get that this is a Hollywood decision and it's all about getting, the box office up. But I don't know, is it on another level, it's completely insulting to your audience, isn't it?
Yeah.
That you whitewash it.
It's that tension between making money with movies and also being part of the culture that reflects it and makes it move forward.
The counter-argument is that, the original Ghost in the Machine produced Ghost in the Shell, so although it's thoroughly ingrained in Japanese culture, we all borrow, all cultures borrow, and, find their way, and memes and stories find their way across the world. That doesn't persuade you?
No, it doesn't. And in fact, it makes me feel the other way, that it should be even more true to the original, doesn't it?
You were talking about, the decisions made at Channel 9. I suppose the bottom line is, a question is, if you can make an extra $200 million for your movie by casting Scarlett Johansson, what do you do if you're in DreamWorks? That's the dilemma, isn't it?
Well, yeah, Hollywood has just the ultimate say, I suppose, and it's backing the movie, but it's just so sociologically wrong.
See, Benedict Cumberbatch is a feminist, but I would have been disappointed if he'd played Emmeline Pankhurst in the Suffragette movie. They should whack him into this movie as her co-star. He's bankable. That'd make $1.
Michelle A'Court, nice to have you back. Good luck with the rest of the tour.
Thank you.
And Paula Penfold, please come back. Nice to have you on the panel.
Thank you, Jim.
Kia ora everyone, welcome to Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm John Campbell. On behalf of the Checkpoint team, thank you for joining us. Tonight, a meat hook in the head and the court's response. Enough. A broad-based coalition from Grey Power to Labour and the Greens calls time on the, quote, disgusting hospital food in Dunedin and Southland. You won't be able to vote online in local authority elections, even though you were told you would be. We asked the Minister why not. We're in New York, where Clinton and Trump have had important wins. And imagine having a dog for 30 years. We speak to the Aussie farmer who lost his mate over the weekend after 3 decades at his side. All of that and more over the next 90 minutes. But first, here's Katrina Batten with RNZ News.
Kia ora, good evening. The Chinese president has told the Prime Minister he's very supportive of Helen Clark's bid for the top United Nations job. John Key says he made a sales pitch for Helen Clark and the UN Secretary-General job in his official meeting with President Xi Jinping in Beijing. He says the president spoke warmly of Ms Clark, and Mr Key says he would be very surprised if China voted against her.
They recognise her as a good friend of China. They recognise the role she had played in the signing of the FTA with China. She's been out here quite a bit. They know her well. In the end, the P5 never say who they're going to vote for, but I'd be absolutely stunned if they voted against her.
John Key says China would not use its veto against Ms Clark as a permanent member on the UN Security Council. A High Court judge has revealed graphic details of how 2 police officers were shot at after a car chase near Whanganui last year. Justice Rebecca Ellis described the moment when the gunman, Dolphy Kohu, opened fire on Sergeant Sean Jones and Constable Darren Barrow near Raitahi. She says when he found himself trapped in his car against a fence, Mr Kohu shot directly at Sergeant Jones with a sawn-off .22 calibre rifle.
Mr Kohu presented a sawn-off semi-automatic .22 rifle and fired it directly at Sergeant Jones. Sergeant Jones and Constable Barrow ran for cover. As they did so, Mr Kohu got out of the vehicle through the open window and continued to fire at them. He fired 5 shots in total.
In his victim impact statement, Constable Barrow recounted his terror when he thought Sergeant Jones had been hit. Mr Kohu died suddenly in prison in January. Justice Ellis today sentenced Carlos Bushell, an accomplice of Mr Kohu, to 9 months supervision and 250 hours community work. The meat company AFCO must pay $55,000 after one of its workers had his face impaled on a hook. The company has been ordered in the Tauranga District Court to pay a fine of $30,000 and pay the man $25,000 in damages. WorkSafe says the company should have made sure a mutton chain was not operating when a night crew was cleaning up at the Rangiuru Works in August 2014. The man was caught up by the hook, which was driven into his face. WorkSafe's chief investigator, Keith Stewart, says the company failed to keep the man safe.
So this was very much about an important message that organisations need to be continually vigilant in their management of risk. Unfortunately, sadly, in this particular case, a man's now got some life-changing injuries that leave him in constant pain.
Keith Stewart says he hopes AFCO has learnt from the investigation. Republican frontrunner Donald Trump has easily won New York State's presidential nominating contest, moving closer to capturing enough delegates to win the nomination and avoid a contested convention in July. Democratic frontrunner Hillary Clinton also won in New York, which she once represented in the US Senate, blunting the momentum of rival Bernie Sanders and taking a big step towards wrapping up the nomination. Donald Trump appeared poised to win most or all of New York's 95 Republican delegates, easily beating John Kasich and Ted Cruz. Mrs. Clinton's win followed some of the most heated personal exchanges of her campaign against Bernie Sanders, who'd won 7 of the last 8 state-by-state nominating contests. An optometrist is shocked transport officials want to do away with eye tests when people renew their driver's licence. The Transport Ministry is proposing people get their eyes tested when they first get a licence and after they turn 75, saying research shows repeated testing is unnecessary. The ministry would rely on people declaring the state of their eyesight instead. But Tauranga optometrist Anya Fisher says eye tests can make the difference between life or death on the road and people need regular testing.
It's very easy not to realise that your vision is changing or that your vision is failing, and it can range from literally your vision altering slightly and not being as reliable in the dusk or night driving conditions to almost losing half of the visual field.
Optometrist Anya Fisher. Submissions close in June. In sport, the Warriors and former All Blacks doctor John Mayhew is in an induced coma in North Shore Hospital following a heart attack last night. Mayhew was the All Blacks team doctor for 13 years. A family spokesperson says he's now in a stable condition. Auckland City have cruised into Oceania Football's Champions League final after a 4-1 win over the Tahitian side AS Tefana in Albany this afternoon. All 5 goals were scored in the first half of the match. Midfielders Micah Lea Alafa and Clayton Lewis scored 2 goals each for the local side. It'll be Auckland City's 6th consecutive appearance in the final on Saturday. Dylan Schmidt says he's still coming to terms with the fact he's the first New Zealand trampolinist to qualify for an Olympics. The 19-year-old has finished second at the Rio 2016 test event to seal his place at August's Rio Games. No New Zealander has made the Olympic field since trampolining joined the gymnastics program in 2000 in Sydney. Schmidt was at a loss for words when reflecting on his achievement.
I'm just stoked that all the hard work, that I've done and all the adversity that I've kind of been through is paid off, and yeah, just a surreal feeling. It hasn't really sunk in yet, but I'm sure it will eventually.
Dylan Schmidt. The All Black and Blues lock Patrick Tuipulotu has recommitted to New Zealand rugby until the end of 2019. Meanwhile, John Plumtree is sticking with the Hurricanes coaching staff for the 2017 and 18 season, ending the speculation surrounding his move south to fill the vacant Highlanders head coach job. That's the news.
Hi, it's Paul Brennan in for Brian Crum tonight on Nights. We head to the Middle East when the editor of the International Jerusalem Post and Jerusalem Post columnist Liat Collins reports in from the State of Israel. Another episode of the BBC programme Where Are You Going? Last week, Catherine Carr was stopping people on the streets of New York. This week, she's in Amsterdam. Our changing world with a new report on sea level rise and more. And the new Jazz Archive looks into the life and music of the late Dave Brubeck. Tonight on Nights after 7, RNZ National.
Met Service weather to midnight tomorrow. Northland fine spells with the odd light shower. Auckland, Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, also Gisborne to Wairarapa. Fine today, cloudy periods and isolated showers tomorrow. From Waikato to Wellington, including the Central High Country, also Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury, Buller and Westland. Fine, apart from areas of morning cloud or early fog. Otago and Southland generally fine tomorrow, but areas of morning fog and the odd light shower in the south later. For Fiordland, occasional rain. The Chatham Islands, a few showers for a time overnight. Cloudy periods tomorrow. It is 5:08.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. One of the things I didn't mention at 5 o'clock that we're going to look at tonight is also this big discussion, this huge discussion about drugs and the changing attitude towards the war on drugs that's taking place in New York. We've got a fascinating interview on that from someone who's there later in Checkpoint. But we are going to begin tonight with a meat worker whose face was impaled on a hook. He's been awarded $25,000 in damages. The meat company AFCO has been ordered in the Tauranga District Court to also pay a fine of $30,000. WorkSafe says the company should have made sure a mutton chain was not operating when a night crew was cleaning up in the Rangiuru works in August 2014. The man, already caught up by the hook, then had his head trapped in a disused steel barcode scanner, so the hook was driven into his face. Meat Workers Union Director of Organising, Darian Fenton, was in court today and she joins us on the line now. Darian, are you there?
I'm there.
Welcome. Nice to talk to you. Kia ora. Does the punishment fit the crime?
Well, no. Look, to be honest with you, I was disappointed with the fine. I think WorkSafe did a very good job in prosecuting this, and we want to see more of that. And maybe under the new health and safety laws, we'll see the fines that are, a bit higher, because actually this is chump change for a company like AFCO Tallies.
Yeah. The issue is, and I'm really confused about this, is why was the chain working while the cleaning was taking place? Who was at fault there?
Well, what's clear from the court evidence and what the judge said today is that AFCO's own protocols said that the chain would be switched off while cleaners were cleaning around that area. And they actually didn't follow their own protocols, and nor had they briefed the supervisors and the cleaners involved. So while they were saying, some other industries, some other companies will have the chain working, their own protocols failed them and failed this worker.
And have you any idea why the protocols failed in these circumstances?
Well, I can speculate on that. I saw a comment today from the chairperson of AFCO, Tully, saying, that it's all about individual workers and they've got to take responsibility, and why didn't the worker just step back and not do his job? My experience with these workers, who are brave and gutsy, actually doing that kind of thing means that they probably are going to get the sack.
And this speaks to previous tensions that you, the Meat Workers Union, and many of your members have had with this particular employer. And boy, we've spoken about that a bit on Checkpoints. Is the relationship with AFCO improving? There was a sense, I thought, from Tauranga that what happened in Rangiuru has been rectified and put right and can't happen again. Are things improving?
No, they're not. I mean, we've got ongoing court action, and that's one of the issues that we've got. We've got a company owned by one of New Zealand's richest families who contest everything the court says. So we've got court action stacked up, appeals and our own court action. It was good to see that, that Jason got through that today, and I was pleased for him and his wife, and I was pleased he got $25,000 reparation. The question for me and the workers on that site and other AFCO sites is, will it change anything? I'm not sure about that, because what I see is an attitude from the company that the workers actually shouldn't have any say, and health and safety is something that needs to be dictated, not having workers involved in.
Darren Fenton from the Meat Workers Union, thank you very much indeed for your time this evening, and we are trying to get hold of AFCO now. A group comprising Grey Power Southland, Unions Southland, Unions Otago, the Labour Party, the Green Party and New Zealand First are calling for the Southern District Health Board to end Compass's contract to provide hospital meals in the far south. The call came this afternoon after weeks of complaints about food quality. Until this year, meals were made in-house, and food at Dunedin Hospital in particular had been widely praised for its good-to-eat quality and nutritional benefits. But as a money-saving move, Compass won the contract and now ships food down to the Deep South from the North Island. Described on a scale that's included terms such as revolting and disgusting, the food's been defended by Health Minister Jonathan Coleman, who even ate a meal himself in Dunedin Hospital. Critics said it wasn't the food. Patients are being served. And now, according to Anna Huffstutler, a spokesperson for this broad-based new coalition, enough is enough.
And we've formed this Real Meals Coalition, which is inclusive of Unions Southland, Unions Otago, Grey Power Southland, the Green Party, New Zealand First and also Labour. We set this up because all of us individually were getting complaints and concerns from our community members in regards to what's happening with the food and the standard of food that's being served, not only in the hospital but in the community to our elderly people.
How bad is the food really?
From all reports, it's pretty horrific. It's so horrific that it's being posted on social media on a daily basis. So we're hearing that people can't eat it, it looks disgusting. It's just continually not getting any better. In fact, in some reports it's looking worse.
And so what you've done is you've got Grey Power Southland, political groups through trade unions to the Green Party and New Zealand First. They're unusual bedfellows. In fact, I can't recall the last time they were all working together. So there is absolute unanimity from those groups on what? What do you want?
Well, I think through the conversations and what's been happening with our food locally, we'd like the DHB to consider seriously ending the contract with Compass. Because it's not working, it's failing.
So you are calling as a group, Real Meals Coalition, this group of Grey Power, Unions, Labour, the Greens and New Zealand First, are calling on the DHB to drop Compass?
Yeah, we most certainly are. They're not doing what they said they were going to do when we went through the consultation process. People are being adversely affected. There's lots of questions around where the food comes from. We're seeing what it looks like. People are losing weight when they're in hospital. We're saying that what we had in the first instance, which was an in-house kitchen that was procuring food from local producers, was far better than what we've ended up with now.
Andy, you talked about a consultation process and what the DHB had agreed to. Can you elaborate on that? What had they agreed to?
Well, when we went through the consultation process last year before the District Health Board voted in favour of the Compass contract, was we were told quite clearly from the DHB, the board chair, Carol Heatley, that this model of food service would ensure that the meals would look better, they would be more, appetising. They said it would be in line with national nutritional standards. And this model of food service would also produce a lot more options for patients that were in hospital and potentially, obviously, those in the community as well.
And has any of that eventuated?
Well, from our perspective, most certainly not, John.
Okay.
No.
Okay. I guess one of the arguments that the DHB keeps advancing is, gosh, the health dollar is stretched tight, and whatever Compass is doing is cheaper than what was happening previously. Is that a valid point?
Well, yes and no. I mean, the decision was a fiscal one that was made quite clear during the consultation process. But, the savings that we were told they were going to make over a 15-year period was only $7 million. And that was on the basis that all other DHBs throughout New Zealand joined this national contract. So it was on scales of economy. I don't believe that that $7 million in the bigger scheme of things, especially compared with ensuring that people in hospital and in the community are receiving good, nutritious, pleasing to the eye food, is really worth it, John.
And so you have formed this group. You have said to the DHB you want Compass out. Do you have any reasonable expectation that the DHB will listen?
Well, we'd like to hope they are, considering they are, they're responsible for the hospitals in our community. And there's been a huge amount of uproar and outrage from both Southland and Otago in regards to the food. So we'd like to think that they're going to take this extremely seriously, given the parties to this coalition.
Anna Huffstutler, the spokesperson for the coalition. What does the DHB say? Well, nothing yet. We are awaiting a reply from them. 5:17. Coming up on Checkpoint, 8 councils express interest in online voting for this year's local body elections. Local Government Minister Louise Upston joins us to say why it's not going ahead. We go to New York as Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton chalk up big wins in the presidential primaries there, probably bigger than was expected in both cases. Plus, the Ministry of Transport proposes stopping eye tests when drivers renew their licences. And we speak to the Aussie dairy farmer who farewelled his dog Maggie at the grand old age of 30. It's a beautiful interview about man's best friend with a tough old Aussie bugger who loved that dog to bits, coming up. In 2013, the government announced a trial of online voting in the 2016 local authority elections, a step forward from a government that's investing a great deal in its broadband strategy. This stuff matters. Well, it's now 2016 and the trial's not happening. That was announced yesterday, but there seems to be confusion about why it's not. 8 councils, and from south to north, they're Selwyn, Wellington, Porirua, Masterton, Palmerston North, Whanganui, Rotorua and Matamata Piako, had expressed interest in online voting. Some of them, along with local government New Zealand, have now expressed disappointment that the trial's not going ahead. A fact I raised with Associate Local Government Minister Louise Upston.
So I know that they've put in a lot of work and they're really keen to get an online voting trial up and running. But the fundamental thing is that we need New Zealanders to have confidence in the local body election system. And unfortunately, in the time frame available, the requirements that we'd set out last year, the councils in the trial haven't been able to demonstrate that they've met those requirements. So unfortunately, it's just not proceeding at this point in time.
If we go back to your predecessor, Chris Tremaine, announcing this in September 2013, it was an absolute. The media release begins online voting to be trialled at 2016 elections, full stop. So what's gone wrong?
Well, we put requirements out at the end of last year, and at that point, some of the councils who were keen to participate decided not to proceed. So there was 5 councils in that category.
Why did they pull out?
For a variety of reasons, but it's probably best for you to talk to those councils. Some of it was about cost, I understand. Some of it was they weren't confident that they could meet the requirements. But 8 decided that they wanted to carry on, and the work that has been done isn't lost. But given that we have an election this year, it's just a matter of not being able to ensure that those requirements had been met.
And what requirements, sorry Minister, what requirements weren't met? What were you most worried about?
Well, security is clearly one of them. We need to make sure that the secrecy of the vote is protected. And we needed to make sure that if somebody cast a vote online, that it could be verified that that vote had been cast. People needed to be able to ask the question to find out if a vote had been cast in their name. There's basically what we had asked for was what I believe, well, it actually is specified in the local government election legislation. So we needed to meet the principles of local body elections. And unfortunately, in the time available, the councils haven't been able to demonstrate that they could meet those requirements.
Okay, so where does this leave you with this process? Because the problem for councils, and it is a very real one, is that fewer than half of New Zealanders are participating in local body elections now. And there is a sense that some way people have got to be dragged in. And this was going to be the way to do it. So what happens now?
No, so I do want to correct you on that, because there isn't evidence from the countries overseas who have introduced online voting that it has any impact on voter turnout. So this is not the silver bullet.
Okay,
but
you're contradicting the government's own line here. If we go back to Chris Tremaine in 2013, he says voter turnout on local body elections is traditionally low, and we need to look at other ways to encourage people to become involved in the democratic process. I mean, that was one of the reasons the government gave, your predecessor gave, for trialling online elections.
Yep, and what we've seen from the countries so far, some countries have trialled it, and then basically the Netherlands, for example, had a successful trial, and then because of security concerns passed another piece of legislation to ban online voting.
So where are we at, Minister? Where are we at with, will there be online voting in New Zealand, and if so, when?
Yep, so the next step is for local councils to let me know how they want to proceed. Do they want to go for the full online trial for the next local body election, or do they want to take a staged approach and look at what pieces of online voting they could put in place and reduce the risk? So, for example, a by-election, or to be able to put some electronic voting mechanisms in place for the next election, and then have a phased rollout of online voting. So there's a number of options. I'm clearly not going to dictate what they are. I'm really keen to work with the councils that have put the work in so far. It won't be lost. And so I want to meet with them and work out what they see the pathway forward is and how we can work together on it.
Louise Upston, listening to that was the Mayor of Porirua, Nick Leggett. Porirua, of course, being one of the cities that signed up to take part in the trial. Nick Leggett joins us now. Welcome to the program, Nick. Were you confident you could meet the various requirements?
Oh, yes, we were. We work with, there are two electoral companies that provide election services to councils and other entities actually around New Zealand. Both are international companies, and they're at the coalface of this. Actually, they run e-voting for elections around the country for iwi-based organisations, boards, political parties even. And they have said, look, we are ready. We understand there's a bigger hurdle to jump in terms of security, but we are confident. Unfortunately, DIA officials didn't bother to visit them once at the coalface, and the word I have heard back is that officials actually didn't appear to understand the questions they were asking, let alone, waiting to hear the answers.
Okay, so when you listen to Louise Upston, the Associate Minister, saying what she said, and you were on the line, so you heard what she said, which seemed to suggest councils weren't ready and actually were telling her that, what's Porirua's position?
8 councils told her they were ready. There are some very disappointed councils around the country because they believe that they've got confidence in the technology and in the security and the verification. And, she mentioned sanctity of the vote and noticed that she didn't actually give any specifics about any of this. They were just sort of vague statements. And the other thing that was mentioned by the government was that communities weren't consulted. Now, we consulted in Porirua 4 years ago and got pretty positive support, and we've been an e-voting council since then, and we've been ready to take up the... to take it up.
Okay, why isn't it happening then? Given that your vision of events and her vision of events is so different, and local government New Zealand is expressing disappointment, it's not happening. Why isn't it happening, do you think?
Because it does require the government to take a bit of a punt. This is unknown, and I can understand why they're nervous, so I don't hold it against the minister for being cautious. Ministers generally act on the advice of their officials, and in this case, the officials, I think, have been nervous and cagey from the start. You raised the issue about overseas examples, and she talked about some. The point is, if you look at Estonia, they've done it successfully, and they've run several elections now online, and they've actually seen a rise in turnout. So you can select, you can be selective in these examples. You've got to make sure you're comparing apples with apples. I think that at some point, if we want to move participation and democracy into the 21st century, we have to dip our toe in the water. And this was the prime opportunity. I think delaying it 3 years won't give us any more certainty. In fact, I think it will increase nervousness. You actually just have to be sure. You have to proceed and understand the risks. But you've got to do it. I mean, we don't have a perfect system now. She talked about the ability to verify your vote. Yeah. We know that voter fraud happens with postal voting. It's the door is wide open for that to happen. So actually, what we want to do is widen the franchise and increase the ability for people to participate. And I think we're all used to doing things instantaneously online now. I think that we've got to take the next step with our democracy and do that with voting as well.
Nick Leggett, Mayor of Porirua, thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening. We're going to stay with politics and elections. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton have both chalked up big wins in the New York presidential primaries, probably bigger than was expected. The moment the polls closed, CNN announced Mr. Trump as the outright winner for the Republican vote. So certain was his victory.
The polls are about to close in New York State. In fact, they should be closing right now. And with the polls closed, CNN projects that Donald Trump, the billionaire real estate magnate, will win the Republican presidential primary in his home state of New York. We don't know how much he will win by. We don't know the delegate count yet, but we do project that Donald Trump will be the winner in the Republican presidential primary. A huge win.
And it was indeed. Wolf Blitzer, Donald Trump won 60.5% of the vote, and in his victory speech said it's clear who the American public want as their Republican nominee.
We don't have much of a race anymore. Based on what I'm seeing on television, Senator Cruz is just about mathematically eliminated. And we've won another state. As you know, we have won millions of more votes than Senator Cruz. Millions and millions of more votes than Governor Kasich. We've won, and now, especially after tonight, close to 300 delegates more than Senator Cruz. So we're going to celebrate for about 2 hours. Then early in the morning, I get up and we begin working again. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, New York. We love New York. We love New York. Thank you very much, everybody.
Donald Trump, of course, on the Democrat side. Hillary Clinton won the vote with 57.9% to Bernie Sanders' 42%. The race that had been expected to be tighter than that was with both nominees having significant links to the state, probably more one-sided than people thought with Clinton. Bernie Sanders grew up in Brooklyn, while Hillary Clinton was the two-time New York senator. And there was a sense that New York would get behind Sanders. Our correspondent in New York, Lorna Shattuck, joins us now via Skype video. Hi, Lorna. Welcome to Checkpoint. Lovely to have you with us. Was Hillary Clinton expected to do quite so well?
No, I think people did think this would be much more of a neck-and-neck contest. Certainly the Sanders supporters were hoping that. As you say, although she did have a hometown advantage in that she's been senator here for 8 years, Bernie Sanders also had that. He was born and brought up in Brooklyn, made a big deal of that at the weekend. He held a huge rally in Prospect Park. 27,000 people turned up to that. But I think he was stymied in what partly by the very strict voter rules here in New York, because what perhaps many of his supporters didn't realise was that in order to vote in the New York primary, you have to be registered as a Democrat or as a Republican. It's what's called a closed primary. So if you weren't registered, you couldn't vote. And the deadline, crucially, for that registration was all the way back in October last year. So that was well before a lot of people were particularly interested in this primary. And therefore, particularly on the Bernie Sanders side, a lot of young people came to this, were infused by this in the last couple of weeks or so, but they felt disenfranchised and they couldn't cast their ballot.
OK, so Sanders is appealing enormously to new voters, first-time voters. Does New York spell really bad news for Sanders, or can he regain the momentum that he's had over the past fortnight?
Well, he will say yes, absolutely. And in fact, he didn't even hold a sort of party here in New York. He's already moved on to Pennsylvania. He was campaigning in Philadelphia already. And that is the next state, one of the next 5 states to vote. Again, these are northeastern states where he does have a good chance of doing well. Of course, he being the senator from Vermont. So he'll be hoping to pick off more delegates from Hillary Clinton there. And then the contest moves to the West Coast, where again, in California, he feels he has got a very good support base, particularly, as you say, among young people. But I think mathematically now it is looking more and more difficult for him to do seemingly the impossible and unseat Hillary Clinton. However, just by staying in the contest this long, he's seriously rattled her campaign. Yeah. And not only that, but the longer he stays in, the more time and attention he buys himself from the Democratic Party, and particularly when we come to the convention in July, they will have to give him now a big speaking spot and a lot of attention. He's proved himself well worthy of a lot of support from many Democrats.
Sure has. Lorna, can we briefly discuss the Republicans? Trump seemed to have hit a speed bump in the form of Cruz, but in fact Cruz finished third in New York, didn't he? Didn't even come second. So, boy, more wind in Trump's sails, right?
Definitely. And New York was never really going to be natural territory for Ted Cruz. He didn't campaign here very much. And when he did in the Bronx, he almost got chased out of town. He was not a popular candidate at all. Worth campaigning, though, because you do still manage to pick up a few delegates by doing that. But yes, I think New York was always going to be really Trump's home turf. He was kind of feeling the king of the Empire State. Of course, he himself is a New Yorker. It was never really going to go otherwise. Lots of big stronghold in particular on Staten Island, but also upstate, former manufacturing areas in the Rust Belt, places like Buffalo and Rochester, where, a lot of jobs were lost, and his message on trade and the economy really does resonate.
Lorna Shattuck, live from New York via Skype video. Thanks so much for joining us, Lorna. We really appreciate it. 5:32 and a bit on Checkpoint. Coming up, friends in high places, the Chinese president has told the Prime Minister he's supportive of Helen Clark's bid for the top UN job. Remember, China is a permanent UN Security Council member. They get a big say in this. Bay of Plenty councillors say the sale of local water by the company Aurovida in China highlights the problems New Zealand has managing one of its most important resources. No one owns water, but we're sure selling a lot of it offshore. Z Energy polls customers about banning wicked camper vans from their petrol stations. And an Australian dairy farmer farewells his pet dog, Maggie, at the grand old age of 30. It's a beautiful interview. Plus, Sharon is standing by with news on the Teagle float. But first, I'm apologising, Katrina, because it's late. Sorry, the 5:30, not RNZ headlines.
The Chinese president has told the Prime Minister he's very supportive of Helen Clark's bid for the top United Nations job. John Key says he made a sales pitch for Helen Clark and the Secretary-General's post in his official meeting with President Xi Jinping in Beijing. He says the president spoke warmly of Ms Clark, and Mr Key says he would be very surprised if China voted against her. A High Court judge has revealed how 2 police officers ran for cover when they were shot at after a car chase near Whanganui last year. Justice Ellis described the moment when the gunman, Dolphy Korhu, was trapped in his car against a fence and shot directly at one of them with a sawn-off .22 caliber rifle. Mr Korhu died suddenly in prison in January. Justice Ellis today sentenced Carlos Bushell, an accomplice of Mr Korhu, to 9 months supervision and 250 hours community work. The meat company AFCO must pay $55,000 after one of its workers had his face impaled on a hook. In the Tauranga District Court, the company was ordered to pay a fine of $30,000 and $25,000 in damages. Donald Trump has secured a crucial victory in the Republican presidential primary in New York, while Hillary Clinton triumphed in the Democratic race. Mrs. Clinton's win followed some of the most heated personal exchanges of her campaign against Bernie Sanders, who'd won 7 of the last 8 state-by-state nominating contests. An optometrist is shocked officials want to do away with eye tests when drivers renew their licences. The Transport Ministry is proposing people get their eyes tested when they first get a licence and after they turn 75, saying research shows repeated testing is unnecessary. And businesses in the Christchurch suburb of New Brighton are calling on the council to keep its pier open while earthquake repairs are completed. I'll be back at 6 with more news, sport and weather.
Thanks, Katrina. We go to New Brighton shortly. Beautiful down there, so we'll discuss that in a moment. But let's turn to business news now with Sharon Brett-Kelly, the Oracle, who last night predicted the Tegel listing would be at the bottom of the range. Where is it, Sharon?
That is how close I am to the action, Tom.
Well, that's good. That's what we want.
No, well, no, I have to admit, it wasn't me, of course. It was somebody who told me that's what it would be, a fund manager. And yes, $1.55, bottom end of the range. That range, remember, we were talking about yesterday, between $1.55 and $2.50.
Who was the fund manager? Is he or she on the record?
Yeah, no.
Wow.
But yeah, and that number would surprise some people who were saying to me yesterday they thought it would be more like the mid-range.
So we explain the process. When Tegel go to the market, they say we're going to put our shares up, and there's a range of somewhere, as you said yesterday, between 150 and 250.
Yeah.
And so this is the market determining kind of advance value before they formally go out for sale, right?
That's right.
And so 155 is right at the bottom end, as you said.
And I'm told it was heavily oversubscribed, but at that number, at that figure, at 155.
So at $2 there would have been much less interest.
Exactly, exactly. And as people were saying to me today, you know, keeping it cheap answers to some of those concerns about a private equity firm trying to not so much rip off investors, but trying to make too much out of it.
Because a private equity firm is now regarded as an unreliable describer of value, right?
After the Dick Smith debacle.
Yeah. And we're not saying that is the case with Tegel, but clearly the market is cautious.
There's a lot of caution. And also people are saying, you know, it's pretty good to keep it at that low level because then interest is going to be strong when trading starts in the shares. And also those who want to make a quick buck, who want to make a speculative profit, they might make a bit of money once it starts trading as well, because hopefully it's going to climb a bit once trading begins.
So list at 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 cents above price or whatever, people just flick it off immediately.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's the thinking. More than 50% of the shares will be in New Zealand hands to start off with. So the allocation was, you know, in New Zealand's favour. And someone was saying to me, well, that may have kept it at the bottom end of the range as well, because perhaps there wasn't a lot of interest from Australia. I mean, this is a New Zealand company after all.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's, okay. Oversubscribed is interesting very quickly because I pushed everything so long tonight. Dairy auction results, dollar went up. So what did the markets do today?
The markets, well, share markets cracked 6,900, so 8th consecutive close.
Wow.
And they're saying no sign of it falling. But one analyst is saying there could be a bit of turbulence ahead. There might be a bit of a wall when it tries to hit 7,000.
Okay, and what did the dollar close at? Do you have
the
that?
dollar closed at around about 70 US cents and I think about 90.03 Australian.
Gosh, everything's up. Everything is up.
Cheap money.
Yeah.
Cheap
Goodness
global
gracious
money.
Me. Sharon Brett-Kelly, thank you very much indeed. See you tomorrow night. The Chinese president has told the Prime Minister he's very supportive of Helen Clark's bid for the top UN job. John came out a sales pitch for Helen Clark during his official meeting with the president in Beijing today. China is a permanent member of the UN Security Council, so it has power of veto, but President Xi told Mr. Key China would not use its veto against Ms. Clark. It's interesting that's on the record so early on. John Key told reporters he'd be surprised if China voted against Helen Clark.
They are very supportive of Helen Clark. They recognise her as a good friend of China. They recognise the role she had played in the signing of the FTA with China. She's been out here quite a bit. They know her well. In the end, the P5 never say who they're going to vote for, but I'd be absolutely stunned if they voted against her. So on the basis that she was a credible candidate and subject to all of the other vagaries of that system, I think that they're very supportive of it.
So if you believe that they won't vote against her, obviously you believe they'll vote for her?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, in the end, it depends on... I mean, the P5 are in the unique position of having a veto. There's no chance of them vetoing Helen Clark. In the end, will they vote for her vis-a-vis another candidate? I don't have a sense of that today, but I know they think highly of her. She's, I came away thinking she's in good shape there.
Who raised the issue? Was it you or was it President Xi?
Yes, I initially raised it, of course. I mean, I'm doing that and I intend to do that everywhere I go now. But, I went through the general sales pitch of why I think she would be the best person for the job, why I thought they should support her, reminded them of her history with China. But look, they were well and truly briefed on the issue. They knew a lot about her. I think she'd been out here about a year ago. They certainly know her well, and they were really genuinely quite warm towards her.
Would you want to say that she might be their favourite candidate?
I just don't know. I mean, the President made the point that there are there are all sorts of discussions happening about whether a particular region is going to get favoured in this particular round or they're not. We don't know whether the veto will get exercised on one or two of the candidates. Very, very early days at this point. I think over the next couple of months, by the time we get to June or July, we'll have a much greater sense, because if the veto is likely to be applied to one or two of the candidates, then the way I understand the system works is that they don't necessarily apply the veto. They just get told the veto would be applied, and they typically drop out. So let's sort of see who stays in the race.
John Key speaking in China. Aurovita, known for its dairy exports, paid just $526 last year to draw up 400,000 litres of water, up to that, a day from the Otakiri aquifer in Bay of Plenty. It then bottled and sold that water in China for about $1.60 a litre, based on prices listed on the company's website. Aurovita was criticised in 2014, many of you will remember, after former Justice Minister Judith Collins, whose husband is on the company's board, attended a dinner in China with company executives. But it's how New Zealand manages its fresh water, rather than Aurovita, that's drawing criticism from local politicians and ecologists. Kate Newton reports.
The money Aurovita paid for the privilege of taking water from the Otakiri aquifer covers the cost of checking they're complying with their resource consent. And under the Resource Management Act, that's all Bay of Plenty Regional Council is allowed to charge them. And freshwater ecologist Mike Joy says therein lies the problem.
This is a national issue that we have, that we refuse, or that our governments refuse to put a price on water. And so this is the core of the issue. It's just a free-for-all for a tiny proportion of New Zealanders that get to abuse this, something that belongs to all of us.
It's the third time in the last few months that bottled water companies have come under scrutiny for how much, or rather how little, they pay for the water they're then selling. Last weekend, Ashburton residents marched in the streets of their mid-Canterbury town to protest the pending sale of council land to the water company NZ Pure Blue, a sale that comes with the right to extract 45 litres of water a second from the town's aquifers for the next 30 years. And in March, Coca-Cola Amatil told Checkpoint it pays just 1 cent for every 10 litres of water it bottles in New Zealand. A Bay of Plenty regional councillor, Tipani Ma, says he's flabbergasted that Aurovita is paying so little.
We've got a full council tomorrow. I'm going to bring it up. How we only charge $500 a year, and look at the money that we're going to make. I can't remember the figures, but it was bloody astronomical anyway.
But the council's deputy chair, Jane Nees, says the issue's fraught with complexity.
I don't think decisions can be made at a local level. I think some calls need to be made at a national level on the philosophies and principles of charging for water.
Down the road from council headquarters, though, Tauranga kiwi fruit grower Mike Smith says as long as the aquifer's being managed carefully, he doesn't see a problem with water consents for Aurovita or anyone else.
That's no different to adding value to milk by putting water through a cow and turning it into milk and exporting that, or growing vegetables with it. As long as New Zealand's getting the benefit from exporting the water, it's as good a commodity export as anything else.
The Regional Council's chair, Doug Leader, says no matter what people's take on the issue, now is actually the perfect time to have their say on the future of freshwater in New Zealand.
The appropriate document that's currently in the public domain is the discussion document on the management of freshwater in New Zealand. That's the vehicle that I think the public at large should consider feeding some of these concerns if they have concerns into that document.
Mr Leader says the news about Orovida is a timely reminder to do so. Submissions on that consultation document close this Friday. For Checkpoint, Kate Newton.
London has one, New York has one, and now Christchurch has one. Property developers have branded part of the CBD the West End, stretching 8 city blocks on the west side of the Avon River from Cambridge Terrace to Hagley Park. The area has flourished post-quake with business developments and the hospitality industry setting up shop. But just a day after Crown-created agencies Otakaro and Regenerate Christchurch took over the reins of Sarah, the CEO was appointed. Is this another sign private development is leading the way in the rebuild rather than the government? Here's Sally Murphy.
As you stand on Cambridge Terrace and look east, you can see the square derelict with the damaged cathedral in its heart. The only sign of life is the tourist taking photos. On the other side, in the new West End, looking down Worcester Boulevard, you can see the art gallery on the right, cafes filled with office workers, and the museum in the distance. 3 property developers came up with the idea to rebrand the area the West End. One of them, Ngaitahu's property development manager Gordon Craig, says the name gives it prominence, just like any other precinct in the city.
This side of the river has not really had any clear identity. In people's minds, the CBD, even before the earthquake, stopped at the river. And to all intents and purposes, it did. But after the earthquake, there's a hell of a lot more development that's gone on the west side of the river. And even with the blueprint, while it's included in the central core, it has no identity.
Mr Craig says most of the West End is functioning with hardly any empty lots.
Well, there's 1 or 2. They're currently car parks where buildings were demolished. But yes, for the rest of it, the actual construction within the area will have finished a long time before it will have in other parts of the city.
Central City Business Association manager Lisa Goodman says it's great the area is rebranding itself.
Progress is actually being made with the rebuild. Despite delay in getting some of the projects underway, like the convention centre, we're still making some good progress. We know that key retailers are making commitments in key locations in the centre, and we know that corporate and government workers are moving back in their thousands.
She says private developers have led the way with the rebuild, but the government has also made significant contributions, bringing in thousands of office workers.
But it would be fair to say that our members do have some concern that the empty space can appear to give the impression that the city is almost divided, that there appears to be an obstacle, if you like, to sort of cross before you get from one side of the square to the other. So we are very keen to see progress made in terms of both Federal and the Convention Centre.
Yesterday, Crown company Otakaro took over the reins of Sarah, tasked with completing the anchor projects. Its chair, Ross Butler, told Checkpoint last night he hopes in the next 6 months the company would have made decisions to encourage more development in the city.
They're already poised to make big decisions themselves, but they're just waiting for this company to make a move, and we will, as from today. So in 6 months' time, they would have started making their big investment decisions about the redevelopment of Christchurch.
And with the Prime Minister saying just last week he expects an announcement on the Convention Centre shortly, Central City business owners hope the rest of the city will match up with the West End rather than ending up a dead end. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Sally Murphy.
Optometrists are shocked. Transport officials are considering dumping eye tests when people renew their driver's licence. The Ministry of Transport is proposing people get their eyes examined when they get a licence the first time and then again when they turn 75, saying research shows unnecessary testing is taking place in between. Maya Burry reports.
An optometrist and associate professor at the University of Auckland, Jennifer Craig, says she's alarmed to hear of the ministry's proposal.
Slightly horrified, I'm slightly concerned. I'm really disappointed to see that they're threatening to take the eyesight component out of it and the retesting. It seems a shame to do that. I always thought that was a really positive thing that New Zealand did.
A Tauranga optometrist, Anya Fisher, says eye tests can make the difference between life or death on the road, and people need regular testing.
It's very easy not to realise that your vision is changing or that your vision is failing, and it can range from literally your vision altering slightly and not being as reliable in the dusk or night driving conditions to almost losing half of the visual field.
Anya Fisher says she couldn't think of a single optometrist who would support the proposed changes. For most people, a driver's licence is valid for 10 years, and when it's renewed, there's an eye test. The Transport Ministry would rely on people declaring the state of their eyesight instead, but Jack Crawford from the Association of Optometrists says that's concerning.
What they're aiming for is to put the onus on the driver to make sure their vision is up to scratch, and I think that's probably fair, but I also think there needs to be some robustness in monitoring that.
Another option the Ministry has put forward would mean anyone who's provided an eyesight certificate for a licence application within the last 5 years would not need to have their vision rechecked. Tim Grafton from the Insurance Council says while that change seems more reasonable, it could still raise some issues for insurers.
There are questions that do arise about how quickly people's eyesight can degenerate. Certainly the older you get, degeneration of eyesight can occur a lot quicker.
And people we spoke to in Wellington support frequent testing.
I think that people's eyesight tends to get progressively worse as they get older. I would think that they would need to test it a little bit more regularly.
Well, we've had friends who have, had to get glasses from getting their licence.
I think that's probably not a very prudent approach. I think it makes sense to actually get it tested on a much more frequent basis. That's for the safety of all of us.
But the Ministry of Transport's Leo Mortimer says the change would maintain road safety whilst making it easier for people to renew their licences online.
We will be expecting the optometrists and the medical practitioners to provide us with their views, and we have engaged with them leading up to this. We welcome their ongoing interest and submissions and thoughts.
Mr Mortimer says submissions on the Ministry's proposal, which also looks at heavy vehicles and specialist driving licences, are open until the beginning of June. For Checkpoint, Maya Burry.
8.5 minutes to 6 on Checkpoint. A Wellington woman has been found not guilty of murdering her mother's partner. Instead, a jury in the High Court in Wellington found her guilty of manslaughter. Daryl Kirk pleaded not guilty to murdering Adam Watkins after she fatally shot him in their Taita home in the Hutt Valley in February of last year. Our reporter Tiana Barnes was at court and joins us now from Wellington. Hi Tiana, how did the shooting happen?
Well, back in February last year, Kirk was at home with her boyfriend, her mother and Adam Watkins, and they were having a gathering with some friends at their home in Taita. Mr Watkins became angry and agitated after an argument and grabbed a meat cleaver and told everybody to get out of the house. Kirk then ran upstairs and grabbed her boyfriend's gun from a drawer and fired at Mr Watkins, and he was hit about 3 times in his chest, back and shoulders. And her lawyer said that she thought Mr Watkins was going to kill her with the meat cleaver and that she was acting in self-defence. However, the Crown says that because Mr Watkins was shot in the back, that shows that her actions were unnecessary.
Yeah, what was the reaction to the manslaughter verdict?
Well, Daryl Kirk was actually very calm herself. She remained facing forward towards the judge and the jury. Her family were in the public gallery behind her and they were relieved to hear that not guilty verdict to the murder charge. But her mother Kelly said outside of court that she does feel for Mr Watkins' family. They were also there themselves. They were initially hopeful. They sort of whispered yes when they heard that guilty for the manslaughter charge, but later they were sort of dismayed that Kirk could qualify for home detention, and the police were also there and made a brief statement saying that this was a preventable tragedy and they should always be called before a situation like this escalates.
Tiana Barnes live from our Wellington newsroom. Thank you very much indeed, Tiana. We appreciate it. Well, it's 6.5 minutes to 6, and this is a lovely story. If a dog really is a man's best friend, a dairy farmer from the Australian state of Victoria probably has a tale to beat them all. Brian McLaren farewelled his dog Maggie this week. But what makes this story special is that Maggie, a Kelpie, was 30 years old and is thought to be, although this isn't verified, the world's oldest dog. By our calculations, in dog years, she's 133, but mathematicians feel free to contradict us. I asked Brian from his dairy farm in Woolsthorpe about Maggie's legacy.
We got Maggie, we reckon, when we got 3 sons and 2 of them were at school and their youngest wasn't. And he'll be 34 next month.
Wow.
So he would have to be 3 or 4 in that era. So she could be like 29, 30 or even a little older, I don't know. But it started out as a bit of a joke at work. We milked 700 cows. And in the office one morning they wanted her in the Guinness Book of Records, and that's how it started.
And so you got Maggie as a puppy. She was just a few weeks old, was she?
Yeah, she was about 10 or 12 weeks old when we got her. And she's lived on farm ever since.
The same farm, her entire life on the same farm?
Yeah, yep. And we moved off farm 16 years ago, and I took her, well, we had to travel about 15 k's to go home, and I took her home the first night, and she barked all night. Didn't like it, so I left her on the farm.
And so you'd see her every day or most days?
I know, I'm at work every day, and I feed her every morning at 5:30. And she's there waiting for her food, and it changed over the years, of course, because initially she was on the pellets and whatever, and then over the last probably 12 months she's been on the soft food. And I'd feed her and she'd stand over it with the food between her feet and bark at the cats that would come trying to get it off her. She wouldn't eat it for 10 minutes. She'd just have a fight with the cats for 10 minutes first. And the same with her milk. You'd fill up a bowl with milk and she'd do the same thing with it. So she was totally part of the family. Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. But not pampered or anything like that. She would come with me on the back of the bike, and in the mornings I'd have to go and get the cows in the dark, and she would disappear, and she'd arrive, maybe a K from the dairy. She'd arrive at the back of the paddock, just in the dark. Hated riding on the motorbike. She'd get off the motorbike and run, and then she'd disappear, and then she'd arrive at the back of the cows. And she's just a terrific dog. That's lonely old work doing that stuff in the dark. So she was your mate? Yeah, oh yeah. It just, not a day had passed that she didn't come for a pat. And as she got older, just in the last probably 12 months, she wouldn't come and rush up to. She'd come and bump me on the leg, with her head and want to scratch, because she got that way that she couldn't scratch behind her own ears and things like that. So she'd come and bump me if I was having to be doing cups off or something. If we got a bit of time. And in a rotary dairy, she would just crash into me. I want to scratch. And so you'd do it, of course. Oh, of course, yeah. Away she'd go again, Yeah. And so what happened? You just turned up and she'd gone, she'd just drifted off during the night? Yeah, on Friday. My worst fear is that I would have to have her put down because of her age, and she'd just get too far gone, but that didn't happen. Friday she was a bit off the pace and didn't want to eat all her food. And when I went home, I said to my wife, Maggie hasn't got long now. And then Saturday, she ate even less. And Sunday morning, she didn't eat at all. And now I'm thinking, this is going to be a vet job. What am I going to do here? And then Monday morning, I came to work a bit early. I checked her at 5 o'clock, and she was in a basket, tucked up where I left her Sunday night, and she had died peacefully. Yeah, which is perfect for the way I wanted her to go. Yeah. Yeah. So she looked after you at the end, eh? Oh yeah. Yeah. Look, we spent most of our day together. Yeah. She didn't ride in the tractor or anything, but she was always at the office door. Brian, this story's gone totally worldwide, and it's because people love their dogs, and to have a dog for 30 years is really special, isn't it? It is. Yeah, I missed her yesterday. My wife Sue said to me, "You're going to miss her." I said, "No, she'll be right." And I missed her yesterday. I was sitting in front of the office where she normally comes for the pat, and she never fronted, of course. And I thought, "Oh, my old dog, she's gone, bugger." But you move on. The story started out as not trying to get her recorded as the oldest dog or anything like it. They've got a back paddock page in the Weekly Times over here, which they take the mickey out of everybody. And I rang the Weekly Times instead of trying to find when she was actually born, and just said I was going to put a caption in and a photo, I'm 30, beat that. But they ran a full-page story on it back in November.
and now you're doing an interview in New Zealand, and the story's just travelled, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. Yeah, incredible. Yeah. Sometimes you can be lucky with a pet or a dog, you know. That she was a really good dog, and I've had good dogs that have died before her, you know. It would only last, you know. I mean, the tanker got one of them, as they do. But, you know, you get a dog to maybe go 10 or 12 years if you're lucky, and then only work for 8 of those 10. But she has been terrific, you know. So yeah, very fortunate.
Yeah. Are you going to get another one? Because obviously it's a working farm and you need a working dog.
Yeah, 700 cow farm. But I can do without a dog, and I don't think I'll replace her. I think I'm done and dusted with that. And we can do without a dog, because she hasn't worked for probably over 10 years.
She's been an old age pensioner, retired.
She has,
Brian.
She's been doing it real easy.
Brian McLaren, who was Maggie's proud owner for 30 years. That's a fairly good estimate, because they got Maggie when his son was about 4, and he's now in his early to mid-30s. Coming up to 6 o'clock. Kia ora everyone, you are with Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm John Campbell on behalf of the team. Thank you for being with us. Coming up in the last 30 minutes of tonight's program, the future of the war on drugs. This is being much discussed in New York at present. It is really fascinating to hear what, representatives of drug-damaged countries like Mexico and Colombia are saying. Will the world listen? We're there. What anchor projects do Cantabrians want to see in the central city? This is a follow-up to last night's discussion. And could wicked camper vans be banned from some petrol stations? All of that and more in the next 29 minutes and 10 seconds. But first, here's the news with Katrina Batten.
Ngā mihi nui, good evening. The Chinese president has told the Prime Minister he's very supportive of Helen Clark's bid for the top United Nations job. John Key says Xi Jinping said China would not use its veto against Ms Clark as a permanent member on the UN Security Council. Here's our political reporter, Demelza Leslie.
Mr Key says he made a sales pitch for Helen Clark for the Secretary-General's role in his official meeting with President Xi in Beijing. He says the President spoke warmly of Ms Clark and recognised she was a good friend of his country, having been Prime Minister when New Zealand signed the 2008 Free Trade Agreement with China. John Key says he would be absolutely stunned if China voted against her. Mr Key is in Xi'an today inspecting the region's transportation and logistics hubs and will visit the Terracotta Warriors Museum and Great Mosque later tonight. In Xi'an, Demelza Leslie.
A High Court judge has revealed graphic details of how 2 police officers were shot at after a car chase near Whanganui last year. Justice Rebecca Ellis described the moment when the gunman, Dolphy Kohu, opened fire on Sergeant Sean Jones and Constable Darren Barrow near Raitahi. Robin Martin reports.
Justice Ellis said when he found himself trapped in his car against a fence, Mr Kohu shot directly at Sergeant Jones with a sawn-off .22 caliber rifle. As the officers ran for their lives, Mr Kohu got out of his car and fired 5 shots at them. In his victim impact statement, Constable Barrow recounted his terror when he thought Sergeant Jones had been hit. Mr Kohu died suddenly in prison in January. Justice Ellis today sentenced Carlos Bushell, an accomplice of Mr Kohu, to 9 months supervision and 250 hours community work. This is Robin Martin.
A meat worker whose face was impaled on a hook has been awarded $25,000 in damages. The meat company AFCO has been ordered in the Tauranga District Court to also pay a fine of $30,000. WorkSafe says the company should have made sure a mutton chain was not operating when a night crew was cleaning up in the Rangiuru Works in August 2014. The man, already caught up by the hook, then had his face trapped for a moment in a disused steel barcode scanner so that the hook was driven into his face. WorkSafe says the man has life-changing injuries with ongoing headaches and pain moving his jaw. The frontrunners for the Democratic and Republican parties in the United States presidential election, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, have scored comfortable victories in the crucial state of New York and regained lost momentum. After beating Bernie Sanders, Mrs. Clinton said there was more that united them than divided them. Addressing her supporters in Times Square, Mrs. Clinton reflected on a long campaign.
We started this race not far from here on Roosevelt Island, pledging to build on the progressive tradition that's done so much for America, from Franklin Roosevelt to Barack Obama.
Hillary Clinton after the New York primary. The Treaty Negotiations Minister has been told at a hui on the TPP the government has ignored not only Ngāpuhi but all New Zealanders. About 70 people attended today's hui in Whangarei on the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, with 30 protesters lining the road outside the venue. The Minister, Chris Finlayson, was challenged by several Ngāpuhi speakers, worried the trade agreement could nullify New Zealand's sovereignty and concerned at the ability of the Crown to resolve its outstanding treaty issues under it. Catherine Murupainga-Aiken was one of them.
The Trans-Pacific Partnership is just another of just innumerable examples where the governments, successive governments, have gone off and done things which have profoundly affected not just Māori people's rights and responsibilities, but all citizens as well.
Catherine Murupainga-Aiken. Mr Finlayson said at the meeting the TPP would not impinge on New Zealand's sovereignty. A divided jury has found a Hutt Valley woman not guilty of murdering her mother's partner, but guilty of manslaughter. Daryl Kirk pleaded not guilty to murdering Adam Watkins, who she shot at their Taita home in February last year. Tiana Barnes was at the High Court in Wellington.
Kirk remained calm in the dock while the verdict was read today. Her lawyer earlier told the court the 20-year-old shot Mr Watkins in self-defence after he came towards her with a meat cleaver. She retrieved her boyfriend's semi-automatic rifle from the bedroom and fired 6 shots at Mr Watkins, who was hit 3 times, in the neck, chest and back. The jury returned this afternoon after a day of deliberating, saying they couldn't reach a unanimous verdict. Justice Clark said they could reach a verdict with an 11-1 vote. Mr Watkins' family were visibly upset and quickly left the court. Daryl Kirk will be sentenced in June. This is Tiana Barnes.
In sport, the Warriors and former All Blacks team doctor John Mayhew is in an induced coma in North Shore Hospital following a cardiac arrest last night. A family spokesperson says Mayhew is in the intensive care unit but is in a stable condition. The 61-year-old was the All Blacks team doctor for 13 years and the Warriors doctor for the past 10. It'll be an all-New Zealand affair in Oceania Football's Champions League final this Saturday after Auckland City FC and Team Wellington cruise past their semi-final opponents. Auckland FC beat Tahitian side AS Tafana 4-1 this afternoon before Team Wellington made it into the final with a 2-0 win over New Caledonian side AS Magenta. The former West Coast Fever coach Sue Gaudian says some of New Zealand teams must be cut from the Trans-Tasman Netball Championship if the competition is to survive. The New Zealand teams have made a poor start to the RNZ Championship season with only the Southern Steel in the top 4 of the overall standings. 3 of the 5 New Zealand teams are winless after 3 games and an Australian side has won all but 1 of the 8 titles so far. The Australian golfer Adam Scott has ruled himself out of selection for the Rio Olympics, opening the door for Mark Leishman to play for golf's first gold medal in 112 years. That's the news.
Truck trouble in the far north.
It's speed and lack of attention to the road causes most of the single accidents where no cars are involved.
A leadership splits in the Māori Council.
And you just can't have loose wheels on a machine like this.
And Johnny Depp in the dog box.
He looked like he was auditioning for The Godfather, but at the end of it, we've got a message that is going all around the world right now.
Keep up with the big wheels. Guy Aspinall and Susie Ferguson, Morning Reports, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, how a New Zealand company's robotic legs are helping to rehabilitate US soldiers. And after 10, the intriguing true story of the Olympic athlete who defied Hitler. Champion wrestler Vienna Zeelandbinder's story's been brought to life by historian and author James McNeish. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather to midnight tomorrow. Northland fine spells with the odd light shower. Auckland, Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, also Gisborne to Wairarapa. Fine today. Cloudy periods and isolated showers tomorrow. From Waikato to Wellington, including the Central High Country. Also Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury, Buller and Westland. Fine apart from areas of morning cloud or early fog. Otago and Southland generally fine tomorrow, but areas of morning fog and the odd light shower in the south later. Fiordland, occasional rain. The Chatham Islands, a few showers for a time overnight. Cloudy periods tomorrow. It's 6:09.
Thank you very much, Katrina. The war on drugs, it's getting a global rethink for the first time in 20 years. The UN General Assembly is looking at the issue, but there are deep divisions within its member states, with some, including many Latin American leaders, favouring more liberalisation of drug laws and pointing to the irreversible trend towards legalising drugs such as marijuana. New Zealand's representative, Associate Health Minister Peter Dunn, spoke at the special session this morning, saying the world needs to be bolder in its approaches and that countries were hamstrung by outdated punitive approaches. Entrepreneur Derek Handley is also at the UN for the Assembly. He's pushing for reform through the global Support, Don't Punish campaign. I asked him about the positioning that was taking place by countries and options ranging from legalisation at one end to outright war at the other.
I think a lot of countries are going further, around the decriminalisation and different alternatives for markets, regulation, those kinds of things are all being proposed. We had the Uruguayan team up today talking about, their vision of regulation for all types of drugs, and they've been the first country to do medicinal marijuana. And, you have those kinds of visions and plans that are being put in place by people that just feel it's just not being dealt with properly.
What are being cited as the success stories, Derek? I see lots of mentions of Portugal and the Czech Republic. Who is being hauled out as a poster child for how you get it right?
Well, yeah, I think that's the interesting thing. It's not necessarily that there's one way. What's being talked about is that there's a whole portfolio of approaches that any government could now consider, from how you reduce harm and damage to individual users of drugs, to how you treat the criminal justice system, to how the implications are in HIV and all sorts of things. So it's really a collection of different things that different countries are trying. I think in the past it's been, yes, that Portugal and Switzerland have been held up, as iconic pioneers. But now it's almost like, you've got a whole series of countries just trying different things that they think will suit their country and their culture.
Peter Dunn has said that the world is too cautious on this. Many people are saying New Zealand is too cautious on this. Are we sounding stronger in the UN than we're behaving at home?
I knew you were going to say that. Well, he came out brilliantly today. Amazing, address. I managed to catch it. And yet, I'm sure you've seen the text. It's about boldness. And, I think he is saying all the right things. It's about then what do you do at home to make some of those ideas a reality. But I think there is a little bit of a gap between Minister Dunn's vision and where we are. But I think that's how you create, the future. You have a gap between where you want to go, and then you design and implement things to get you there.
And also, Dunn is one politician, right? He's the only member of his party in Parliament, so he has to take other people with him, including the National Party caucus, which is much more conservative on these issues. You said he was brilliant. What did he say? What was so good?
Well, I just think it was, one of the more kind of progressive and inspiring addresses. He spoke specifically around, the missing pillar of this debate being boldness in I think aspiration and probably action, and he just underscored, the approach of taking it from a health first perspective, and those kind of initiatives those kind of approaches that I think are increasingly what the world wants to hear, and also what the world is starting to hear from people like him.
There are so many vested interests, though, aren't there, also in not resiling from the current position. Entire police forces, entire border protection agencies, a sort of moral panic industry that has built up around the war on drugs. How do you accommodate those pressures from the old guard who say, no, we have to keep fighting it?
Well, I think you start from a point that it's not working. The current method is not working. You can go to a point of compassion and empathy as a human being, and that prison is not, a treatment for drug users. It doesn't work. It's not a way that you treat any other health issue. We've been building this war on, not based on facts, but on fiction and ideology and fears and prejudice and beliefs and values that, there come times when those things need to be readdressed and rethought. And to have these kinds of narratives being led by many of the countries you spoke about, Colombia being at the heart of a lot of this in the 90s, is one of the most, I guess, shocking in a positive way. It's all these countries that have been waging this war the hardest are the ones coming out the strongest, saying, we need to change.
Yeah, Mexico's really interesting, isn't it? Because so many Mexicans have died, so very, very many, countless. And now they're saying, hey, this hasn't worked and there has to be a plan B. That must have real impact to hear the Mexicans say that.
Right. The whole collection of those countries that initially, they joined up to form a global commission, which they started releasing white papers and positioning on these issues. I think it's had a huge impact. And all sorts of other countries that haven't had that massive war effect on them have also led the charge in experimenting with new policies and new ways.
Derek Hanley from New York, he is attending the Assembly. A group of Northland pensioners, meanwhile, this is much more local, are calling for medicinal cannabis to be legalised. Ota Matea, Grey Power president, Beverly Aldridge, who told me she'd never smoked marijuana, even as a youngster, said her members wanted to have the choice to be pain-free as they get old.
Then a friend of ours, a friend of a few of ours actually, he died. And he died of cancer, prostate cancer, and he couldn't get the relief when he was finally in the hospice. They offered him paracetamol, which was really bizarre. He really needed something that was very strong. And then we were talking about it and decided that we could all be in the same position, and we're all going through getting older, and we're starting to get aches and pains, and we're going to need some sort of relief. And what better than something that's natural instead of something that's a drug that has all of the side effects on our kidneys and liver and other parts of our body?
And so this was a collective decision. Did you turn up and discuss it at a Grey Power meeting?
Yes, we did.
And did you put it to the vote?
Yes, we did, and it went through unanimously. Of those that were there, it was put through the vote.
And so it was unanimous?
It was unanimous.
And how many people are we talking about, Beverly?
Well, normally at our meetings, we have about 20 come to our meetings. We've got a group of 43. I'm not sure how many would have been at the meeting.
Okay, so a reasonable number of people given the size of your community. And once it went through unanimously, did you start getting phone calls from people saying, goodness gracious, Beverly, what are you up to there?
Well, I sent the thing off. It's not a matter of that at all. What are we up to? I've tried putting it into a local paper, and I was told it was too political, and I understand that.
But so what are you talking about? You are simply talking about medicinal marijuana, in your case being available for elderly people who are suffering from, in the case of your friend, a terminal illness, and in normal cases arthritis and lots of aches and pains associated with getting old.
Yes, and we know of somebody who had their colitis cured from just the leaf. So we know that it can actually cure without having to even be smoked. It's just a matter of putting the leaf like you would your broccoli or your silver beet into your smoothie, and you can heal yourself.
Right, and so what are you going to take this to central to all of Grey Power New Zealand?
Unfortunately, they're having their meeting, the AGM, as we talk right now. They're probably having their AGM, and it takes a whole year for it actually to be set up to go to the AGM and be accepted with remits and things to go to Parliament. So we decided that because we didn't want to lose a year, we would do our own thing and also submit it to the Grey Power as a remit for them to do next year.
Beverly, I think it's important to acknowledge that actually it's not much fun getting old in some respects. I mean, it beats the alternative though, I guess.
Well, yes.
Yes, it does. But actually we need to take the business of end-of-life care really seriously, because people end up in hospices, people end up having medical care which they can't actually control. And what you're saying is you're hoping for something that will deal with pain, that will alleviate the symptoms and won't mess with your bodies. Is that what you're after?
Yes, and it doesn't mess with your body, and it doesn't mess with your brain, evidently. Like anything else, it messes with your brain if you're OD, from the research I've done.
Beverly Aldridge from Grey Power up north. A fascinating take on it, and we'd love to hear your feedback on that. Now, the founders of a hotel chain and National Party donors who won a government contract to manage a luxury resort in Niue say they would welcome any investigation by the Auditor-General. The Labour Party has been calling for an investigation into the process, but Scenic Hotel founders Earl and Lani Hageman have just released a statement. They say they welcome any investigation from the Auditor-General into the contestable process around the awarding to their company of a management contract at the Matavai Resort in Niue. Should the Auditor-General decide she wishes to investigate this process, we will be offering our full cooperation, Lani Hageman said. In fact, we request that an investigation occurs urgently in order to remove any doubt about the integrity and honesty of our name. In addition to welcoming any Auditor-General investigation, the Hageman say they're considering other legal options to redress these unfounded accusations. That's the first statement since all of this has come out. New agencies, Otakare Limited and Regenerate Christchurch, yesterday took over the reins of Sarah. The agencies are charged with speeding up the delivery of key anchor projects, such as the Convention Centre. You know them. Last night, the Otakare chairman, Ross Butler, refused to give Checkpoint a time frame on the completion of the Convention Centre. We received an enormous amount of feedback from Christchurch residents concerned about a lack of protest, progress, consultation, all of that. Our reporter Sally Murphy went to New Regent Street to ask locals what anchor projects they believe the city needs.
The conference centre. Everything seems to be hung up because it's not going anywhere, that project.
Why do you think we need it?
To cater for the conferences, obviously, that the city hopes to have.
So do you think that should be the first on the list for...
I think so, yes, because that'll attract further activity.
I have concerns about how much they're going to cost and the validity of them in the 21st century. Like, for example, the Convention Centre, really don't think that is something that... It's not a model, it's not a modern way of working anymore. I think a lot of businesses aren't looking to fly their staff halfway around the world to have massive conferences and suck up resources. I think their shareholders would have something to say about that sort of behaviour, quite frankly.
Well, clearly the Convention Centre, as to whether it needs to be in the size and scale that was originally envisaged, I have some doubt. We need a sports and entertainment facility to replace what we lost. QE2 was clearly widely used, and we need to get that happening as quickly as possible. They would probably be the two main ones that I can think of.
I don't know really what constitutes an anchor project. It just seems to me that it's a lot of hype, and I'm more interested in just the nuts and bolts of just day-to-day living, quite frankly.
Meanwhile, businesses in the Christchurch suburb of New Brighton are calling on the council to keep its pier open while earthquake repairs expected to take up to 18 months are completed. In a double blow for the area, the library that adjoins it will also be closed for repairs. Our Christchurch reporter Conan Young visited the pier today to get people's reaction to this development. I spoke to him via Skype video and asked him why the closure is so significant.
Well, John, we're in New Brighton, we're in the east of the city. This part of Christchurch has lost so much after the quakes. It's lost QE2, the main swimming pool for Christchurch. It's lost, entire suburbs, 7,000 people, whole neighbourhoods have gone. And also the businesses that support, that relied on those people. So, throughout all of that, the pier and the library, the fantastic library that is just at the end of the pier here, has been a real constant for people. And it's just, provided a place that provides a bit of normality, something that you can still go and do in the city where, so much has been closed because of the quakes. So, news now that the pier and the library are going to have to close. The pier for up to 18 months, the library for 6 months. It's just another thing that, people don't have.
Yeah, there's a real sense too of community ownership of that pier. I mean, larger Christchurch is really proud of it, but in that local community, it's the heart of it, isn't it, really?
Yeah, look, and we talk about community ownership of something. Well, the community literally does own this pier. When it was built in 1997, half of the $4 million it cost was raised through private donations, from small businesses to just individuals. So $2 million put forward by the community there. So when you talk about this pier, it really does have a special place in people's hearts.
Having said that, the work does have to be done, doesn't it?
That's right. Look, and people I've spoken to today, especially businesses, that they're philosophical about this. They know that this work has to be carried out, to ensure that the long-term future of the pier and the library, to really make sure they stand up to further earthquakes. Hopefully, we won't have too many of those. But they're philosophical. They want it done. They know it will be good long-term. But look, just really hoping that this can be done as quickly as possible. There's a possibility that the council might actually be able to keep the pier open while the work's being carried out. The damage is mostly to the pillars underneath the pier. So businesses have told me today if that can be done, they'd really welcome that.
Colin, it's such a beautiful shot. For people who are listening on the radio, I'm talking to Colin on Skype. Colin, I'm going to ask you to do the rudest thing a reporter has ever been asked to do, and that's step out of the shot so that people who are watching can see the view behind you. Look,
Have a look. It's a fantastic day. Here we are.
Yeah, look at that. So for those listening on the radio, where Colin is standing, there is not a cloud in the sky, and there is an infinity of different shades of blue. Gosh, it's beautiful there, Colin.
Hey, look, John, I'm sorry to spoil the view, but I'm making shot here. But look, as well as this pier, behind me, what you can't see is this fantastic library, which is also going to have to close for 6 months. You can sit in this library and have a view of the beach as you read a book. It's just fantastic. So yeah, a couple of really important facilities here that people are really looking forward to getting fixed and being able to use as soon as possible.
It's one of our excellent Christchurch team, Conan Young. Petrol retailer Z Energy is floating the idea of banning wicked campers from service stations. Wicked campers' offensive slogans have sparked complaints from the public, councils and government ministers like Paula Bennett, who want to remove them from the road. Z Energy says on social media it had suggestions that it should refuse to fill up wicked camper vans, and so it's asked the public to give feedback. I asked Z Energy CEO Mike Bennett what the feedback's been like.
Well, as you'd expect, we're getting the whole range of feedback. We've got some folks who are very keen that we take immediate action, and there are others who are supporting, if you like, a freedom of speech approach and saying, I think quite reasonably, that we shouldn't be punishing a poor innocent tourist for making the selection they did for their camper van.
Yes, I want to discuss a hypothetical with you, Mike. What's your most remote service station, offhand?
It would be somewhere in the South Island, so perhaps somewhere on the west coast.
OK, so the poor old wicked camper van arrives. The camper van is empty, you have one person in charge and they have to go out and tell them they can't fill up there. That's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. And so whatever decision we make on this, we have to give serious consideration to how we would implement it. And we have a significant commitment to our customers. We have a large commitment to road safety. And we wouldn't want to do anything that would put customers and other road users at risk. And so there may be, if you like, an exception to whatever rule may be created here. But I still think there may be some way through the middle of all of that.
Yes, this reminds me of a university tutorial, that it's wonderful to discuss the idea, but actually really hard to enforce, isn't it?
Certainly, and that's why we're pretty keen to hear the ideas and thoughts of our Facebook community, and indeed some of them are starting to point to some of the things we would need to think about if we did put this into effect. Including
how you would, for example, tell the driver of the wicked camper van. Who would do that? How would they do that? Would they have a pro forma letter? Would they have a trespass order? How would that be enforced?
Yeah, those are all great questions. And to be honest with you, John, many of our site staff face choices like this every day. They're usually much more black and white. So, for example, if someone comes onto a service station smoking a cigarette, it's pretty clear that's a dangerous thing to do, and they are trained in how to intervene around that. This is not so black and white, so therefore additional training would be required, but we're not inexperienced around intervening in what happens on the forecourt.
For the first time since its inclusion at has qualified for the Olympics. 19-year-old Dylan Schmidt has finished second at the Rio 2016 test event to seal his place at August's Rio Games. Go Dylan. Our sports reporter Matt Chatterton caught up with Schmidt after today's news.
I'm lost for words. I'm just stoked that all the hard work that I've done and all the adversity that I've kind of been through is paid off, and yeah, it's a surreal feeling. It hasn't really sunk in yet, but I'm sure it will eventually.
In terms of your actual performance in today's event, how did it rate for you?
Yeah, it was good. It was solid. I know I can definitely do better, but I'm stoked that, under the pressure and under the circumstances that I competed the way I did. Getting a silver medal was pretty cool, especially with the quality of the field. It's always pretty, and especially with the pressure on. It was just an amazing feeling, and just really stoked with how everything went.
Yeah, does being able to achieve what you did today under the pressures that you did have give you good confidence, I suppose, going into Rio, knowing that you can achieve what you have to when the pressure's on? Yeah, definitely, and I suppose the last year taught me a lot about handling pressure and all that sort of stuff. So I'm good. I'm good at that and definitely improving on it. So I'm happy with where I'm at. What's it like being able to represent New Zealand or be the first New Zealander to represent us at trampolining? Yeah, trampolining, so it came in 2000, so 3 years after I was born. But yeah, I mean, obviously to be the first person to do something for your country is pretty special, and I'm honoured to be able to say that I'm the first New Zealander to qualify for the Olympics trampolining. It's hard to explain, it's obviously pretty special for me.
Dylan Schmidt, who's off to Rio. We've just heard from the Southern DHB about the calls to have campus meals thrown out. Grey Power Southland, Unions Otago, the Labour Party, the Green Party and New Zealand First, fairly unusual alliance, that one are calling for the DHB to end Campus's contract. In a statement to Checkpoint, Southland's DHB Chief Executive Carol Heatley said 3/4 of patients are happy with the food being served based on Campus's satisfaction surveys. That's Checkpoint for tonight.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Chinese president has told the Prime Minister he's very supportive of Helen Clark's bid for the top United Nations job. A High Court judge has revealed how 2 police officers were shot at after a car chase near Whanganui last year. A meat worker whose face was impaled on a hook gets $25,000 in damages. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton have won their respective primaries in New York, and a divided jury has found a Hutt Valley woman not guilty of murdering her mother's partner, but guilty of manslaughter. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Welcome to World Watch PM. I'm John Greaves. Tonight, another setback in ending the war in Syria. Barack Obama begins a state visit to Saudi Arabia, and the head of Germany's most active